Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here with you today, and I humbly thank you for joining me. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with part two of Gog from Magog, my story time, talking about Gog and my experience after getting hired by wearing glasses. Now, I will add that my colleague that I worked with at the job before this, where we worked ourselves out of a job, I had called him and talked to him about the interview and the fact that I had worn glasses, and he's chuckled and said that it was probably a good thing. He told me he thought that it took the glamour off. Well, what he meant was, I was a corporate professional. I wore suits, I wore pantyhose and heels, and I made my face up, and my hair was short and sharp, and I was just everything you would think of working girl, a professional working girl in a corporate environment of the 80s. I mean, that's what it was. And he felt that the glasses took the glamour off for whatever it's worth. So, okay. Also, during that era were the shoulder pads, okay? Loved the shoulder pads, okay? I had so many high-end suits with shoulder pads, and they were sharp. Anyway, we don't have that anymore. When you look at it now, it was really, emasculating the feminine, and so there you go. But at the time, it was fun, and I dealt with it. Now, talking about Gog, let's just talk about Gog, and it helps to understand his presence in order to understand the event. So Gog was about as tall as I was. Well, maybe he was a little shorter. I'm 5'5", so he's probably about 5'5", maybe. But I wore heels, so I was always standing above him. In other words, I was always looking down on the top of his bald head. Now, he was bald as a billiard, and he had freckles and stuff because he loved being outdoors. He loved to hunt. He loved to fish. He loved anything to do with the outdoors. We were in Colorado, so he was outdoors quite a bit whenever he had a chance to golf or do anything. So, and he didn't wear any protection on his head. He just, his head was his head. Um, but he had this voice, okay, this voice that would just penetrate the walls. He What he would say to me was that his mother told him he learned to whisper in a sawmill. Okay, think about that. Whisper in a sawmill. Oh, every word that came out of his mouth was like scratches on the chalkboard. He just and if he had a quiet conversation with someone at the other end of the office, the whole building could hear it. He just had a voice that carried, and it was grating, and it was and it never stopped. Okay, he was like a dervish when he came into the office. It just never stopped. And in this thing that with the three partners, okay, in the building, he there was one office here, his office was over here, and at the other end of the building, because they had the whole building, the president's office was, there were three partners. So the two partners were on the second floor, and on the first floor was the third partner. He handled things connected to the business that he didn't need to be up with everybody else. And besides, he had a problem with Gog. He was always getting into conflict with Gog, so it was better he not be on the same floor anyway. But the way that they had these offices designed was that this office on this end and this office on this end could see all the way through, because they knocked down all the walls and they built windows, so with sliding glass, so you didn't have to get up out of your desk to go around to talk to somebody in another office. You could just slide the window and have a conversation with them through the wall, basically. And at some level it was nice, on other levels maybe not so, because I was standing next to Gog, who learned how to whisper in a sawmill. I was constantly being inundated on my left ear by everything that was coming out of that side. Now, one time I was on the telephone and I've got the phone over here and he can't really see it because he's tucked away a little bit and he's yelling, barking something at me. And I just turned my head away and I slid the window shut and completely ignored him, which of course frustrated him to no end. He jumped up and he ran over to the window because he was going to give me what for. And he had to wait. I just kept turning my head. I'm not talking to you until I'm finished. And when I finished on the phone and I hung up and I looked at him, what do you want? Can't you see I'm on the phone? And he looked at me and said, well, you have two ears. Why don't you use them both? Okay. That's the kind of person that he was. Now, I was warned when I came into the office. There were two other women, executive women, who supported the partners, the owners, and they were grizzled veterans. Okay, they had been there a long time and they knew the ropes, and they really helped me in some ways. But basically, I was warned about Gog in a number of ways, and I was told, whatever you do, when the mountain man comes, don't let him get any candy. He'll hide it, and then he'll get sugar buzzed, and he'll terrorize everyone in the building. Well, I had to learn that the hard way. And if you don't know what the mountain man is, okay, when you go to this grocery store today, when you go to the supermarket and you're able to buy a pound in a sealed plastic bag of nuts or trail mix or anything like that, it's because of the mountain man in the 80s, okay? They used to, before any of that was done, this particular company would package it and then they would send people to office buildings with baskets of all these goodies, and it was great because they were captive audience, and people who worked in offices always liked to have snacks in their drawers. So when the mountain man came in, Gog would of course rush over and get a few pounds of this candy and hide it in his drawer, and he would eat it. And it would influence his behavior, and it would influence everybody else in the building. So there were a number of times when I had to dig in his drawers to recover anything that he was stashing because he was just out of control. Well, he was out of control all the time. I had to let him know that on a few occasions. In fact, one time I got so mad at him. In my mind, I'm scolding him and I'm shaming him, I think, for as much as anything else. And in my mind, by this time I'd been there a few months and I thought, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe I just need, but I didn't have the courage to quit. So I thought, oh, I just wanted him to fire me. So in my mind, while I was scolding him, I'm thinking, oh, I hope he fires me. I hope he fires me. And he never did. He never did. He wouldn't fire me. And he just took it. He just took it. But in the end, it changed the behavior and he improved his treatment to the others in the building. So it was a good thing. Some of that. And I found that in the building, he was a terror. But when he left the building, it was like the mask dropped, literally, and he became somebody else. He became like a little boy who wanted to have fun all the time. Now, he was married. He had a lovely family. He had 3 children, and he had one daughter that was very close in age to my daughter. So, we lived while we worked in Denver. We both lived in different parts of Littleton, Colorado, which is, I lived on the west side closer to Ken Carl Ranch, and he lived more on the east side closer to the river. And so if his car broke down or he had car problems or vice versa, if I had car and I didn't have a ride to work, he would come and get me or I would go get him. It didn't happen often, but once in a while, we would give each other rides. And so I would pick him up. We would drive into town, and it would be fine driving. We'd have a great time, nice time, whatever. And then the minute we walked through the glass doors into the building, I would watch the mask drop over his face and he'd become this little terror. And then that night, when we walked out at the glass doors at the building, it would drop and he would become the happy little boy again. It blew my mind. I mean, I think what I learned from him was how he separated his work world from his happy world, his life, his work life from his real life. And I had never really had that. I had never really known that. And so he taught me a lot about that, but the way that he would transition was like, what would you call it? Multiple personalities or something. It was like 1 minute he's this and the next minute he was that. And I really only saw that when it came to coming in the building and leaving the building. It was very, very interesting um, thing to observe. But from it, I learned boundaries. I learned how to that it was really better to be able to. It took me a long time to really implement it, but that was my first real noticing of the need to separate the work life from the home life and not to bring the work with me home, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So I have more to say about Gog from Magog, but for now, I think that's enough. You know, he taught me boundaries. So this is my story for posterity's sake, and I would love to hear your stories as well. Any fun stories you have to say. For now, though, this is my story for the record, and I'm sticking to it. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.